Okay, so far we have reviewed, in addition to the grammar that has been the thinking part of each course class session that we've had. We've begun with grammar and moved into writing. We've reviewed writing paragraphs and actually applied simple paragraph writing to an accident report, and this week to the task of selling not quite a Craigslist ad, but a piece of real estate. If I were a student in this class, I would wonder a little bit about, gee, when do we start to really apply this into business writing, maybe things that I haven't done a lot of. As we get into our third class here, our unit 3, we're going to review essay structure and move on to things that historically students have told me they either haven't done very much of, or at best, maybe they've had some limited experience in a classroom that really wasn't all that simulated towards what they needed. So I'm interested in business letters. And if I think about business letters, actually, I want to expand that. I want to think about business correspondence, memos, emails, replies, cover letters, all sorts of things. And in the same way that when I talk about paragraphs and I sort of attack the idea that a paragraph is defined by the number of sentences it has, I would tell you that as we get into fundamentals for business here, if we think about business letter process, if we think about what we're trying to accomplish, we have to really identify what problem we're trying to address. And that's what this graphic is for. I'm going to start it now and revisit it maybe a couple of times as the course goes on. But just for your purposes, and I will admit, a little bit outside of my comfort zone, so the aesthetics here may not exactly line up and my geometry might be a little bit off. But as we think about identifying specific problems, if you look at our pink box here, the question becomes, who is this for? Who is my intended audience? That's kind of important. The way that we speak to internal customers, our coworkers, might vary. I would hope that if we find ourselves as managers and supervisors, that we address and deal with everybody in a professional manner. But I can tell you that a memo that would come down from the president of our technical college is going to read quite differently than an email that might come in one on one communication from that same person. There's a formality and there's a purpose. Going the other direction, I have seen administrators within our 600 some employees, I wouldn't say be reprimanded. There's again the tone and time, place, purpose element. But I have seen them recently reminded, scolded, whatever, that you don't put an email out to every one of the employees for something trivial. So, with that in mind, let's think about who is this for? Who will be reading this? You're in an age as millennials that everything ends up on social media and everything has the potential of reaching a wider audience than intended. That should give you cause to be careful about how you actually put together precise writing. Now, in sort of the aquamarine triangles there, once you decide who the audience is, what kind of format do I need? Do I need a formal business letter? That didn't all fit in that triangle there, so this is letter. But the idea is, do I need the kind of formality where I have an address and date and that? And maybe I do. Business letters are things that are used to initiate contact or a transaction, like a sales transaction, something like that. Obviously, most of the students that tell me they've used business letters will tell me that they've written cover letters, maybe one or two at this point in high school, to reach out to potential employers. Or choice on the right side, do I need a memo? What's a memo for? Well, it's more formal than an email. And memos are those things that are put out there for a policy or some type of statement or clarification on behalf of the company. Sometimes informally, a memo might go out to welcome or announce somebody who's been hired or is a new employee somehow, something like that. With that in mind, the memo has got to be dated. It has the word memo at the top. Think of a mail shelf with all manner of materials in it. But a memo is something that's going to be kept on file, and it might restate a policy or what we're going to do in the future. It's less formal than a letter and probably a little more personal depending on how we're doing this. If you're a manager, you might send a memo out to a small group of people you supervise. Now, as an aside, I remember teaching this course in the past and having some polite questioning, or maybe impolite questioning, from some teachers. It made me question a little bit, gee, maybe we shouldn't be teaching memos. Maybe those are a thing of the past. I did what I think a technical college would do. I went and spoke to employers. Should I drop this from a fundamentals for business course? And the answer I got in three places was no, no, no. Make sure that we're emphasizing professional communications once you get in the workplace. That's something that we don't seem to teach as well as we could. I'm taking a lesson from what I'm told. So my choices would be a business letter or some type of memo. Okay, picking up. And I'm not proud of my color scheme here, I'll tell you right now. If I've chosen to write a business letter, I need to formally describe the context of the issue in the first paragraph that got me to writing. That could be stating exactly what the position is that I'm applying for. That might be putting a context to a customer service issue that needs to be resolved. That might be a complaint beyond customer service that has some type of resolution that is needed. What does that mean? Um, if I were complaining about a policy in the college as a student, I should set the context of that up right at the beginning. This is similar to what we've talked about in essay writing, where I used my first paragraph to set the tone and to gain the reader's attention. When we're writing a business document, be as clear and concise as possible at the beginning. Please don't ask the reader to read something two and three times to figure out what you want. You probably won't get what you want. State the request and the resolution specifically in the second paragraph. How can the reader respond and make this the complainant whole? Who's the complainant? The person with the complaint, the person with the problem. In other words, if I'm the consumer and I'm writing a company to make something right, I'd better be very clear and reasonable in my second paragraph as to how the company can respond to make the situation right. If I look at the memo, I need to keep a professional tone. Those of us who have a gift for sarcasm, we better check that. That's not something that we need here. I do need to speak directly. That doesn't mean it's got to be an individual memo exactly as we talked about in our prompts. It might be that what I really need to do is address my memo to everybody on the second shift that I supervise or everybody in the accounting department or something like that, but it needs to be specific and direct. The first paragraph, much like my business letter, needs to state a shared problem. Be careful here. It's not hard writing in a memo, but if in my first initial paragraph I can't present my purpose as a problem which concerns my audience, I have a problem. They're not going to buy into what I want. If, on the other hand, I lead off my memo with bad news that may not actually pertain, if I start talking about something as simple as a disciplinary issue, a reprimand, or if I go all in and start talking about shutting down a business or firing people in the first paragraph, guess what? Nobody is going to get the message that I'm looking for. Instead, they're going to be reading in fear. Neither one of those behaviors is going to lead to a productive workplace. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. I remind you what I said earlier. As the superintendent pointed out to me, everybody in this room is going to run this community. There can be my business owners, my school board members. You will be in a position where you're writing memos. You have to make sure you don't use that first paragraph to threaten or to freak out the people reading. In other words, make sure that my first initial paragraph is something that relates to everybody in such a way that my next paragraph, the solution, the problem steps, is a shared responsibility. If I'm being written a memo by the Committee on Campus Security, which I'm not on, it's not relevant to me. And if that committee is writing me a memo that in the first paragraph describes people driving through the parking lots of the Kenosha campus in a dangerous manner, I've tuned out already because I don't go to the Kenosha campus very often. It doesn't really relate to me. Now, on the other hand, if the security director writes a memo to the campus employees of all of our campuses and suggests that we're now going to have a parking fee, much like a parking ramp or something like that, where we're paying for our parking every day because we need to chip in on insurance to pay the liability down for all the accidents caused by careless driving. Suddenly that pertains to me. My next paragraph might be a solution. Let's say that's a hypothetical. One of the things that we're thinking about is we may need to install a parking fee to everybody for $400 a year. The solution, the next paragraph, could be several different steps to avoid a parking fee that would make our parking lots more safe. That would, again, pertain to everybody and would be a shared responsibility to solve. Once I figured this out, these two different types of documents, internal versus perhaps external, I can produce a document. One of the things that's been pointed out to me in the past is oftentimes some of the poorest internal documents are written by supervisors, sometimes CEOs, who haven't gone through this process. They react to something. They react to a meeting. They react to a story in the news media that relates poorly on the organization, and they do this in the wrong way. They haven't gone through all the steps to get to the yellow part here, which is the creating aspect of the lesson. What's the document look like? So to sum up at the bottom here, I wonder if I can do this. To sum up at the bottom here, whom are you writing to? Who's your audience? How do you speak to them professionally? Is it a request you're making? How should you word the request? Second, what tool will solve the problem? Do I need a formal business letter? Which, by the way, would cover generally individual requests. Later in this course, we'll talk about replying to a request, something I'm told we really don't cover all that well in college necessarily. When there is a complaint to my business or organization, how do I respond? And what's the tone? We want to be precise, we want to be short, and we want to figure out what tool will solve the problem. Once we've done that, we can use the tools in this unit further to begin to construct the kind of document that we want.